Queen Nari stood in the Grand Council chamber, her blue skin shimmering under the bright lights. The massive room buzzed with tension as representatives from dozens of alien species watched her every move. Her tall, elegant frame remained perfectly still, but inside anger burned like fire. The human territories had been causing problems for months, small fights along the borders, trade disputes. Her military commanders wanted war, but the Galactic Council had other ideas. They wanted peace, and they wanted it now. Your Majesty, the council speaker's voice echoed through the chamber. The terms are simple. A marriage alliance between your royal house and the human leadership will end all conflicts immediately. Nari's purple eyes narrowed. Marriage to a complete stranger. The very idea made her stomach turn. In Vaxian culture, queens chose their mates after years of careful consideration. This felt like selling herself for political gain, but the alternative was worse. Without this treaty, the Council would impose trade sanctions on her empire. Her people would suffer. The expansion into the rich Outer Rim territories would be blocked forever. Everything her ancestors had worked for would crumble. Her chief advisor, an old Vaxian named Commander Yuki, leaned close to her ear. The human they've chosen is Captain Jiho Kim. He leads their third fleet. Our intelligence reports say he's typical of their species. Nari had read those reports many times. Humans lived barely 100 years compared to her people's 1,000-year lifespan. They were driven by strange emotions that clouded their judgment. Their technology was decent but nothing special. Their military tactics were straightforward and predictable. They're soft creatures, Yuki whispered. Weak hearts, weak minds. This marriage will give us exactly what we need. Access to their trade routes, their resources, their territories. The captain will be easy to control. The room fell silent as everyone waited for her answer. Nari looked around at the other species representatives. Some seemed hopeful for peace. Others looked like they were enjoying watching the proud Vaxian. Queen be forced into this situation. She thought about her people back home, millions of Vaxians living in crystal cities beneath their planet's 3 moons. They trusted her to make the right choices. They needed those new territories to build, homes for their growing population. I accept the terms, she said loudly, her voice carrying across the chamber without any hint of the frustration she felt inside. Cheers erupted from the peace-loving species. The Warhawks looked disappointed. The human representative, a middle-aged woman with grey hair, simply nodded with respect. As the formal ceremonies began, Nari found herself wondering what this Captain Jiho Kim would be like. Would he be aggressive like most military leaders? Would he try to dominate her? The report suggested humans were unpredictable when it came to relationships. She had never even seen a human in person before. Her species rarely interacted with them beyond basic trade agreements. They seemed so ordinary compared to the other powerful races in the galaxy. The Chronari had superior weapons technology. The Zelthani controlled the best shipping routes. The Morphic Collective could change their shape at will. What did humans have that made them worth this political marriage? She would find out soon enough. The wedding was scheduled for next month on Harmony Station, a neutral meeting place between their territories. For now, all she could do was prepare herself for a life bound to a complete stranger from a species she barely understood. The wedding hall on Harmony Station sparkled with thousands of Vaxian crystals hanging from the ceiling. Each one hummed with a soft musical tone, creating a beautiful symphony that filled the massive space. Nari had insisted on including her people's ancient rituals, even though she felt like she was walking toward her doom. She wore the traditional crystal crown of Vaxian royalty, its blue light matching her skin perfectly. The long white dress flowed behind her as she walked down the aisle, flanked by guards from both species. Hundreds of guests watched from their seats, representing dozens of different alien races who had come to witness this historic moment. But Nari's eyes were fixed on the figure waiting at the altar. This would be her first look at the human she was about to marry. Captain Jiho Kim stood perfectly straight in his dark blue military uniform, decorated with medals she didn't recognize. He was taller than she had expected, with broad shoulders and an athletic build. His black hair was neatly styled, and his face was clean-shaven according to human custom. What surprised her most was his eyes. She had expected to see fear, nervousness, or maybe even greed as he looked at her. Instead, his dark brown eyes held steady confidence, mixed with what looked like genuine curiosity. He watched her approach without any of the anxiety she felt churning in her own stomach. When she reached the altar, Jiho gave her a small bow of respect, exactly the right depth according to Vaxian protocol. Someone had clearly taught him well. When he spoke his wedding vows, his pronunciation of her language was careful but correct. "I promise to honor your traditions and protect your people as my own," he said in fluent Vaxian, his voice deep and steady. The biosensors built into Nari's crown analyzed his words automatically. No elevated heart rate, no chemical signs of lying, no nervous sweat or trembling. Either this human was an incredible actor, or he actually meant what he was saying. The ceremony continued with both human and Vaxian elements. They exchanged rings, made from metals from both their homeworlds. They drank from a shared cup filled with water from 7 different planets. When the official declared them married, Jiho offered her his arm with perfect politeness, instead of trying to kiss her, immediately like she had feared. At the reception, Nari watched her new husband carefully. The intelligence reports had described humans as crude and emotional, but Jiho moved through the crowd with diplomatic skill that impressed even her. When he spoke to the Morphic Collective ambassador, he used their preferred formal greeting, gestures. With the Chronari trade minister, he discussed shipping routes with detailed knowledge that surprised everyone. What caught her attention most was how he treated the service staff. When a young server accidentally spilled a drink near his feet, instead of getting angry, Jiho helped clean it up and made sure the boy wasn't in trouble. When an elderly kitchen worker struggled with a heavy tray, he quietly stepped in to help without making a show of it. Her biosensors kept giving her the same readings. No deception, no hidden anger, no signs that he was putting on an act for political purposes. This was genuinely how he behaved when he thought no one important was watching. During dinner, Jiho asked her thoughtful questions about Vaxian culture and listened carefully to her answers. He didn't interrupt or try to show off his own knowledge. He seemed actually interested in learning about her people rather than just going through the motions. As the evening continued, Nari found herself confused. Everything she had been told about humans suggested they were simple, emotional creatures driven by basic needs. But the man sitting beside her displayed patience, intelligence, and social skills that rivaled the best Vaxian diplomats. Maybe the intelligence reports had been wrong about more than just his personality. The door to their shared quarters closed with a soft hiss, leaving Nari and Jiho alone for the first time. The diplomatic suite was beautifully decorated with furniture from both their cultures, but the atmosphere felt heavy with uncertainty. They were strangers who had just promised to spend their lives together. Jiho stood near the window, looking out at the stars beyond Harmony Station. The formal reception had lasted hours, filled with speeches, toasts, and political conversations. Now, in the quiet privacy of their room, Nari could finally study her new husband without dozens of eyes watching her every reaction. "The ceremony was beautiful," Jiho said softly, turning toward her. "Your people's crystal music was incredible. I've never heard anything like it." Nari nodded, still feeling awkward about the whole situation. She watched as he began removing his military jacket, hanging it carefully on a chair. The human custom was so different from Vaxian traditions, where married couples often took months to become comfortable with each other. As Jiho rolled up his sleeves, Nari's sharp eyes caught something that made her freeze. Long, jagged scars ran along his forearms, the kind that came from combat wounds. When he unbuttoned his shirt to change into more comfortable clothes, she saw even more marks across his chest and shoulders. These weren't the small scars that came from training, accidents, or minor injuries. These were deep, serious wounds that spoke of real battles. Some looked like they had been made by energy weapons. Others seemed to come from bladed weapons or claws. "You've been in many fights," she said, her voice carrying a mix of curiosity and concern. Jiho paused, looking down at his scarred arms as if he had forgotten about them. "A few," he said quietly. "Nothing too serious." But Nari's biosensors were reading his stress levels, and she could tell there was much more to the story. Her intelligence, Reports had mentioned that Captain Kim had seen combat, but they had described it as typical military service. These scars told a different tale. "What happened here?" she asked, pointing to a particularly nasty mark that ran from his shoulder to his elbow. Jiho sat down on the edge of the bed, his expression growing serious. "Raider attack on the Kepler colonies 3 years ago. We were outnumbered 5-1, but there were civilian families trapped in the settlements. My ship took heavy damage, but we managed to hold them off long enough for the evacuation ships to escape. And this one," Nari pointed to another scar across his chest. "Different battle. Pirates had taken over a mining station and were holding the workers hostage. The negotiation teams couldn't reach an agreement, so we had to go in directly. Got caught in an explosion, but everyone made it out alive." As he continued explaining each mark, Nari began to understand something important. These weren't the wounds of a conqueror or someone fighting for glory. Every scar had a story about protecting innocent people, defending colonies, or rescuing hostages. The intelligence reports had completely missed this. They had described human military actions as aggressive expansion, but Jiho's scars told a story of protection and sacrifice. He had put himself in danger repeatedly, not to gain territory or resources, but to save lives. "Why didn't you retreat?" she asked about the Kepler colony battle. 5-1 odds, though most commanders would have pulled back. Jiho looked at her with surprise, as if the question confused him. There were children in those settlements, families, who had nowhere else to go. We couldn't just leave them. The simple way he said it, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, made Nari realize how wrong her people's assumptions had been. They had viewed humans as emotional and impulsive, but this man had made calculated decisions to risk his own life for strangers. She was beginning to understand that her intelligence reports had missed something crucial about human nature, and she was married to someone far more complex than anyone had realized. As the station's artificial night cycle began, Nari found herself unable to sleep. The day's events kept spinning through her mind, and she was becoming more curious about the human sitting across the room. Jiho had changed into simple clothes and was quietly reading something on a small device, giving her space to process everything. "What are you reading?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Poetry," he replied, looking up with a slight smile. "From your home world, actually. I've been trying to understand Vaxian literature better." Nari blinked in surprise. "You can read ancient Vaxian script?" "It took some practice," Jiho said, then began reciting one of her favorite poems in perfect classical Vaxian. His pronunciation was flawless, better than many of her own palace scholars. "How many languages do you speak?" she asked, genuinely amazed. 7 fluently, a few others well enough to get by, he answered casually, as if this was completely normal. "Chronari, Zelthani, Morphic Standard, Old Terran, New Terran, Classical Vaxian, and Trade Common." Nari stared at him. Even her most educated advisors typically knew 3 or 4 languages at most. This was the kind of intellectual achievement that took decades of study, yet Jiho seemed to think nothing of it. "When did you learn all of these?" "Over the years," he said with a shrug. "It helps when you're working with different species. People feel more comfortable when you can speak to them in their own language." As they talked, Nari noticed something even more impressive. When she mentioned events from Vaxian history, Jiho could recall exact dates, names, and details with perfect accuracy. When she quoted a treaty from 50 years ago, he corrected a small mistake she had made, citing the precise wording from memory. "Do you remember everything you read?" she asked. "Pretty much," he admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. "It's just how my brain works. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's annoying." Their conversation was interrupted when Nari reached for a decorative ceremonial blade on the nearby table. The beautiful weapon was part of the wedding gifts, meant to symbolize the joining of their 2 cultures. As she picked it up to examine the detailed engravings, the razor-sharp edge sliced across her palm. Vaxian blood was highly acidic, designed to protect against infection but dangerous to most other species. The bright blue liquid immediately began eating through the metal table where it dripped, creating small holes in the surface. "Don't touch it," Nari warned quickly as Jiho moved toward her. "My blood will burn through your skin." But Jiho was already kneeling beside her, pulling a small medical kit from his travel bag. Without any hesitation, he began cleaning and treating her wound with steady, expert hands. The acidic blood that was destroying the metal table had no effect on his skin whatsoever. "How is this possible?" Nari gasped, watching in amazement as he worked. "Your skin should be dissolving." "Human skin is more resistant to acid than most species realize," Jiho explained calmly, as he applied a healing gel that immediately stopped the bleeding. "We evolved on a planet with some pretty harsh conditions." His medical technique was flawless. He cleaned the wound thoroughly, applied the correct pressure to stop bleeding, and used advanced healing compounds that she recognized as being more sophisticated than what many Vaxian hospitals used. "Where did you learn medical training like this?" she asked. "Military requirement," he said, finishing the bandage. "When you're protecting colonies in dangerous areas, you need to be able to treat injuries that would kill someone before help arrives." As Nari looked at her perfectly treated wound, she realized that everything she thought she knew about humans was wrong. They weren't the simple, primitive species her intelligence reports had described. Jiho possessed knowledge and abilities that exceeded her own people's capabilities in several areas. What else had her advisors gotten completely wrong about human civilization? Hours passed, but sleep wouldn't come to Nari. Her mind kept racing with questions about everything she had discovered. The human lying peacefully on the other side of the room was nothing like what her people had told her to expect. Every assumption seemed to be wrong. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "Jiho," she whispered, "are you awake?" "Yes," he replied softly. "Can't sleep either?" "I need to ask you something," she said, sitting up. "My advisors gave me reports about your species, but nothing matches what I'm seeing. Would you let me read your actual military files?" Jiho was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "If it helps you understand, yes, I'll give you access to my records." He handed her his personal datapad, entering his security codes. "Everything's there. My service history, mission reports, even classified operations that have been declassified." Nari began reading, and within minutes her blood ran cold. The first file described a human colony on a planet called Inferno 7, where the surface temperature reached 800 degrees and acid rain fell constantly. According to her people's surveys, this world was completely uninhabitable. Yet the files showed pictures of thriving human cities protected by energy shields, with millions of people living comfortably in what should have been impossible conditions. "This can't be right," she murmured. "Our scientists said this planet would kill any known species within hours." "The early colonists had a tough time," Jiho said quietly. "Lost a lot of good people figuring out how to survive there. But humans are stubborn. We don't give up easily." The next file was even more shocking. Humans had built cities inside gas giants, floating in the crushing atmosphere where the pressure would flatten Vaxian ships like paper. They had mining operations in the radiation zones around dying stars, places where her people's equipment failed instantly. Most incredible of all, there were human research stations positioned near black holes, somehow using the extreme gravity to power their experiments. The technology required for such achievements was far beyond what her intelligence reports had claimed humans possessed. "Your people told us your technology was basic," Nari said, scrolling through more files. "But these energy shields, these gravity manipulators, this radiation protection, this is centuries ahead of what we expected." Jiho sighed. "We learned a long time ago that showing off our real capabilities makes other species nervous. It's easier to let everyone think we're just getting by with simple tools." "But why hide it?" Nari asked. "This technology could help everyone." "Because power makes people afraid," Jiho explained. "When species see what we can really do, they start worrying about what we might do. It's better to stay quiet and help people without making them feel threatened." Nari found files describing human rescue missions in systems that other species had written off as hopeless. When the Zelthani had given up on their colony ship, trapped in a radiation storm, humans had flown through the deadly energy fields to save them. When Kronari miners were trapped in a collapsing planet core, human teams had somehow extracted them from impossible depths. The pattern was clear. Humans didn't just survive in conditions that would kill others, they thrived there. And they used these abilities not for conquest or domination, but to help anyone who needed it. "Your military records," she said, finding another shocking file. "You've fought in 17 major battles, but every single one was defensive. You've never attacked first." "We prefer not to fight at all," Jiho said, "but when innocent people are threatened, we can't just stand by and watch." As dawn approached, Nari realized the terrifying truth. Her people had planned to expand into human territory, thinking they were dealing with a primitive species. In reality, they had been preparing to challenge the most advanced and capable civilization in the galaxy. The humans had been letting everyone underestimate them on purpose. The artificial sunrise began filtering through the station's windows as Nari sat in stunned silence, still processing everything she had read. Jiho watched her carefully, seeming to understand that her entire worldview was crumbling. "There's more, isn't there?" she asked quietly. "What else haven't you told the galaxy about your people?" Jiho stood up and walked to his travel bag, pulling out a small device that looked completely ordinary. "This is a standard human communication unit," he said, activating it. "Would you like to say hello to my sister back on Earth?" Nari stared at him. "That's impossible. We're 300 light-years from Earth. Even our fastest quantum messages take days to reach that distance." But the device lit up immediately, and a woman's voice came through clearly. "Jiho, how was the wedding? Is she there with you?" "Hi, Mina," Jiho replied with a smile. "Yes, she's here. Nari, this is my sister." "Hello," the voice said cheerfully. "Welcome to the family. I hope my brother is treating you well." The conversation was happening in real time, as if his sister was in the next room instead of hundreds of light years away. Nari's people had been working on instant long-distance communication for centuries without success. "How?" was all Nari could manage to say. "Quantum entanglement networks," Jiho explained casually. "We've had them for about 50 years now. Every human settlement is connected instantly, no matter how far apart." He showed her more devices from his bag. A small cube that he claimed could convert any type of matter into any other type of matter. A medical scanner that could diagnose and treat diseases that Vaxian medicine couldn't even detect. A data storage unit the size of her fingernail that contained the entire knowledge base of human civilization. "Your advisors called our technology primitive," Jiho said with a slight smile. "But we've learned that surviving impossible conditions requires impossible solutions. But the most important thing we've discovered," he continued, "isn't technology at all." He pulled up files on his device showing human colonies throughout the galaxy. But these weren't just human settlements. In every single colony, Nari saw other species living alongside humans as equals. Vaxians, Kronari, Zelthani, and dozens of others she recognized. "We learned something that most species haven't figured out yet," Jiho explained. "Diversity makes us stronger. When you put different types of minds together, they solve problems that no single species could handle alone." The files showed incredible achievements. Vaxian crystal technology, combined with human engineering, had created cities that were both beautiful and incredibly strong. Kronari navigation systems merged with human adaptability had opened up new areas of space that no one had explored before. "Look at this," Jiho said, showing her a recent project. "Morphic shapeshifters working with human doctors have revolutionized medicine. Zelthani traders partnering with human engineers have made space travel safer for everyone. Your people work with all these species as equals?" Nari asked, amazed. "Of course," Jiho replied, looking confused by the question. "Why wouldn't we? Everyone has something valuable to contribute." This was completely different from how her own empire worked. Vaxians conquered other species and used them as workers or servants. The idea of genuine partnership with other races was almost unthinkable in her culture. "Most species in the galaxy try to dominate others or stay isolated," Jiho continued. "But humans learned early that cooperation gives better results than competition. When you're trying to survive on a death world, you need every advantage you can get." As the morning progressed, Nari began to understand the terrifying truth. Humans weren't just technologically advanced, they were socially evolved in ways that made them incredibly powerful. They could unite different species, survive anywhere, and solve problems that seemed impossible. She had married someone from the most formidable civilization in the galaxy, and they had been hiding their true strength from everyone. 1 month. After their wedding, Nari and Jiho were traveling through neutral space aboard a diplomatic vessel, heading to the Vaxian homeworld for their official reception. The ship carried representatives from both species, along with valuable trade agreements and cultural artifacts. Nari had spent the past weeks learning more about her husband, and each day brought new surprises. But she still hadn't seen him in actual combat, only heard stories and read reports. That was about to change. The ship's alarm suddenly blared throughout the corridors. Captain Reyes, the vessel's commander, rushed onto the bridge where Nari and Jiho were reviewing diplomatic documents. "Your Majesties, we have a problem," she announced breathlessly. "3 raider ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding we surrender our cargo and passengers." Through the main view screen, Nari could see the attacking vessels. They were large, heavily armed warships, painted in the red and black, colors of the notorious Shadow Fleet pirates. These weren't desperate criminals looking for easy money. They were professional raiders with military-grade equipment. "Our weapons are no match for theirs," Captain Reyes continued. "This is a diplomatic ship, not a warship. We can try to outrun them, but they're faster." "How many crew members do we have?" Jiho asked calmly, standing up from his chair. 43. "Plus the diplomatic staff," the captain replied. "Good," Jiho said, walking toward the weapons console. "That's not too many to protect." Nari watched in confusion as her husband began typing commands into the ship's defensive systems. "Jiho, what are you doing?" "Solving the problem," he replied simply. The lead raider ship opened communication channels, and a scarred alien face appeared on screen. "Surrender now and we might let some of you live," the pirate captain snarled. "You have 60 seconds to comply." Instead of responding, Jiho activated the ship's external speakers. "This is Captain Jiho Kim of the Terran Fleet. You have 30 seconds to leave this area peacefully." The pirates laughed. "One little diplomat against 3 warships? You humans really are as stupid as they say." 20 seconds, Jiho said quietly. What happened next completely changed Nari's understanding of human combat capabilities. Instead of waiting for the raiders to attack, Jiho launched the diplomatic ship directly toward the largest enemy vessel. The pirates, expecting their target to run away, were caught completely off guard by this aggressive move. At the last possible second, Jiho spun their ship in a tight spiral, avoiding the raiders' weapons while simultaneously launching their small defensive missiles. But instead of aiming at the enemy ships, he targeted the space around them. The missiles exploded in carefully calculated positions, creating electromagnetic pulses that disrupted the raiders' targeting systems. Suddenly blind, the 3 warships began firing wildly, trying to hit a target they couldn't see properly. Jiho used this confusion to position their ship in the exact center of the enemy formation. Then he did something that made Nari's jaw drop. He activated their ship's emergency beacon, not to call for help, but to overload it and create a massive energy surge. The surge traveled through space and overloaded the raiders' already disrupted electrical systems. One by one, the 3 warships went dark, their weapons offline and their engines dead. The entire battle had lasted less than 5 minutes. "Impossible," Nari whispered, staring at the disabled enemy ships floating helplessly in space. "Standard defensive maneuver," Jiho replied, sitting back down as if nothing had happened. "We call it the Dead Star Gambit. Works best when the enemy underestimates you." Captain Reyes stood frozen at her station. "Sir, how did you know their ships would be vulnerable to electromagnetic overload?" "All raider ships use stolen military equipment," Jiho explained. "Stolen gear always has compatibility problems, which creates predictable weaknesses. You just have to know where to look." As rescue ships arrived to collect the disabled pirates, Nari realized she had just witnessed something extraordinary. Jiho hadn't just won an impossible fight, he had done it without killing anyone, and while protecting every person on their ship. This wasn't just superior technology or training, this was a completely different way of thinking about combat itself. The Grand Council chamber of the Vaxian Empire had never felt so tense. Queen Nari stood before the assembled High Command, their blue faces glowing with anticipation. For months, they had been waiting for her report about human weaknesses and how to exploit them for territorial expansion. General Suki, the head of military operations, leaned forward eagerly. Your Majesty, our forces are ready to move into human space as soon as you give the order. What intelligence did you gather during your marriage arrangement? The other commanders nodded, their eyes bright with the promise of conquest. They expected to hear about human vulnerabilities, primitive technology, and easy victories ahead. Instead, Nari took a deep breath and said the words that would shock them all. We will not be expanding into human territory, she announced clearly. In fact, we will be cancelling all aggressive plans against human space immediately. The chamber erupted in confusion. Voices rose as generals and admirals demanded explanations. Commander Yuki, her longtime advisor, stood up with obvious frustration. Your Majesty, this makes no sense. The humans are weak. Our intelligence reports clearly showed they have inferior technology and simple military tactics. One human ship against our entire fleet would be destroyed in minutes. That's what I thought too, Nari replied calmly, until I watched my husband disable 3 heavily armed raider ships using nothing but a diplomatic vessel and basic defensive equipment. She activated the chamber's holographic display, showing footage from the raider attack. The assembled commanders watched in stunned silence as Jiho executed his impossible victory. This is one human, Nari continued, using what they consider standard defensive techniques, not their best technology, not their most advanced weapons, not their elite forces, just normal human problem-solving skills. General Suki tried to object. It must have been luck, or perhaps the raiders were incompetent. The Shadow Fleet pirates? Nari challenged. The same group that destroyed 6 Chronari battlecruisers last year? The ones who raided our own outer colonies twice? She paused, letting that sink in. They weren't incompetent. They were simply outmatched by human tactical thinking. She brought up more data, showing the human colonies her advisors had dismissed as primitive settlements. Images of cities thriving in conditions that would kill Vaxians, technology that surpassed their own capabilities, and innovations that solved problems they hadn't even known existed. Our intelligence reports weren't just wrong, Nari explained. They were catastrophically wrong. Humans have been deliberately hiding their true capabilities from everyone, including us. Commander Yuki looked desperate. But Your Majesty, our expansion plans depend on human territory. Without those resources, our growing population will face serious problems. Which is why, Nari said with a slight smile, we're going to try something completely different. She gestured, and Jiho entered the chamber. The Vaxian commanders tensed, seeing their supposed enemy walking freely among them. But Jiho moved, with quiet confidence, showing no fear despite being surrounded by military leaders who had been planning to attack his people. Captain Kim has proposed an alternative to conquest, Nari announced. Instead of taking human territory by force, we're going to learn from human innovation. They've offered to share their environmental adaptation technology with us. The implications hit the room like a physical blow. With human technology, Vaxians could colonize worlds they had never dreamed of reaching. Gas giants, radiation zones, even the harsh environments near black holes could become new homes for their people. The resources we wanted from human space, Nari continued. We can find them in places no other species can survive, but only if we work with humans instead of against them. General Suki still looked skeptical. And what do the humans want in return? Jiho stepped forward and spoke in perfect Vaxian. Partnership. Your crystal technology combined with our environmental systems could create wonders neither of our species could build alone. Your people's longevity paired with our adaptability could solve galactic problems that have existed for centuries. Think about it, Nari added. Instead of fighting for scraps of territory, we could open up entire new regions of space that nobody else can reach. Instead of making enemies, we could create the strongest alliance in galactic history. The room fell silent as the commanders realized what they were hearing. This wasn't surrender or weakness. This was an opportunity for power and expansion beyond anything they had imagined. Queen Nari had discovered something more valuable than conquest, genuine partnership with the galaxy's most formidable species. 6 months had passed since the wedding. That changed everything. Now on the training grounds of the royal palace, Queen Nari watched something that would have been unthinkable just a year ago. Her elite royal guards, the most feared warriors in the Vaxian Empire, were learning combat techniques from a human. Jiho stood in the center of the practice arena, facing 12 of her best soldiers at once. They had insisted on testing these. Human methods, he claimed, were superior to traditional Vaxian fighting styles. "Remember," Jiho called out to the circling guards, "strength isn't about overpowering your opponent. It's about using their own force against them." Captain Hana, leader of the Royal Guard, attacked first with her crystal-edged sword. Instead of blocking her strike directly, Jiho stepped aside and used her momentum to send her tumbling across the training mat. She landed safely but completely off balance. 2 more guards rushed him from different angles. Jiho dropped low, sweeping one off his feet while redirecting the other's charge into a nearby practice dummy. Both soldiers found themselves on the ground, unhurt but thoroughly defeated. "Impossible," muttered General Suki, who had come to observe the training. "He's half their size and using no weapons." "That's the point," Nari replied, unable to hide her pride. "Human combat philosophy isn't about being bigger or stronger. It's about being smarter." The remaining guards attacked together, thinking their numbers would overwhelm him. But Jiho moved like water, flowing around their strikes and using their coordination against them. When one guard swung at him, Jiho guided the attack into another guard's path. When they tried to surround him, he positioned himself so they blocked each other's movements. Within minutes, all 12 elite warriors were sitting on the training mat, breathing hard and looking amazed. "How?" Captain Hana asked, accepting Jiho's offered hand to help her stand. "Your people fight like you live," Jiho explained patiently. "With honor, tradition, and proper form. Those are good things, but they make you predictable. Humans learned to fight like we had to survive, by using everything around us and never doing what the enemy expects." As the training session continued, Nari reflected on how much had changed. The political marriage that began as a necessity had become something neither of them had expected, a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and shared goals. Standing beside her, Jiho was no longer the unknown stranger she had feared marrying. He was her equal in every way that mattered, and her superior in ways she was still discovering. More importantly, he treated her as an equal, never trying to dominate or control despite his people's obvious advantages. "Your Majesty," Commander. Yuki approached, carrying a datapad with updates from across the Empire. "The joint colonization projects are exceeding all expectations. The crystal-human hybrid cities on Forge World are already producing 3 times the resources we projected." "And the cultural exchange programs?" Nari asked. "Incredible success. Young Vaxians are learning human adaptation techniques, while human students are mastering our crystal technology. The innovations coming out of these partnerships are revolutionary." On the training field, Jiho was now teaching her guards the philosophy behind human tactics. "Every environment is different," he explained. "Every opponent has different strengths and weaknesses. The key is learning to adapt instantly, using whatever advantages you can find." "Even when you're outmatched?" Captain Hana asked. "Especially then," Jiho replied with a smile. "Humans have been outmatched by our environment, our enemies, and our own limitations for thousands of years. We got good at finding ways to win anyway." As Nari watched, she realized this was exactly what made humans so formidable. They didn't just survive impossible situations. They learned from them and became stronger. They turned every disadvantage into an opportunity for growth. The marriage alliance had given her empire access to the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. But more than that, it had taught her people a new way of thinking about challenges and relationships. "Ready for the next session?" Jiho asked, walking over to where she stood. "Always," Nari replied, taking his hand. "What are you teaching them today?" "Something my sister Mina suggested," he said with a grin. "How to turn any ordinary object into a defensive tool. She thinks your guards are ready for advanced improvisation techniques." As they walked toward the training area together, Nari smiled. She had married the galaxy's most dangerous species, only to discover they were also its most honorable. And somehow, That had made all the difference.